Motorcycle racing is my favorite sport. It's high-paced, fast, close-quarters action where every time they go out, riders are writing new entries in decades-old history books. However, as fun as it is, there are days when we are reminded that it comes at a cost. It is one of the most dangerous sports on the planet, and Sunday at the 2025 Malaysian Grand Prix was one of those days. During the sighting lap for the Moto3 race, newly crowned world champion Jose Antonio Rueda collided with Swiss rider Noah Detweiler in a truly harrowing crash. This brought out red flags that delayed the race while riders received treatment and were eventually helicoptered to the hospital. Many fans online, journalists, and even riders have expressed displeasure with the way that the incident itself and the events that followed were handled by the series organizers. I will be the first to admit that I am not a journalist, I was not there that day, and I have no new information to give you. However, I do consider myself to be somebody very invested in the series, and I am fortunate enough to have a platform where I can talk about these things and my feelings on them. Now that this incident has spurred a call to action for the series organizers from so many parties, I would like to make that call a little bit louder. And hopefully sooner than later, the series organizers will realize that most fans care a lot more about rider safety than we do the spectacle of the racing or watching clips of crashes. Because sadly, this is far from an isolated incident. First and most importantly, let's talk about the riders. At the time of the recording, Rueda is reported as having suffered a broken hand, bruising to his lungs, and a severe concussion. Detweiler's family have asked the public to respect their privacy during this time, so I will not speak or speculate on his condition beyond showing the most recent report from his team on screen right now. The reason the crash itself was so severe is because of the speed differential between the riders, with Rueda going quite fast and Detweiler going at a very slow speed. It was likely caused by a momentary lapse of focus from Rueda. Upon seeing the onboard replay, which was shown on the global feed, I was struck by how quickly Detweiler came into frame. Not only did Rueda have very little time to react and respond, but I was struck with how well Detweiler's bike and leathers blended into the trees in the background. I didn't see him initially until he was almost right in front of the picture. I can easily see how, thinking about the status of the bike, Rueda just didn't see him. These kinds of crashes caused by human error are impossible to avoid entirely. They do happen, and crashes like this one in particular are some of the worst ones the series has ever seen. It immediately calls to mind the incidents between Reinhold Roth and Darren Milner, as well as the fatal accident of Norman Brown and Peter Huber. In this case, it has been reported, albeit unconfirmed, that Detweiler suffered a mechanical issue, and that is why he was cruising on the sighting lap. Many were quick to bring up that a recent change to the race day schedule may be partially responsible for this scenario occurring at all, that being the exclusion of Moto3 and Moto2 warm-up sessions. The brief warm-ups may seem redundant and unnecessary on paper, as in that short period of time there's no way to really make any meaningful setup changes. However, it does allow for one very, very important factor, and that is the potential discovery of mechanical issues on the bike. Most bikes are completely stripped down after qualifying and rebuilt, and the warm-up sessions provide valuable track time for riders to discover any possible faults. Without this session, the first track time these bikes see is the race itself, and this is obviously a much more dangerous situation in which to have a mechanical failure. This issue also directly relates to the issue of the series promoters taking more focus away from Moto3 and Moto2 in favor of MotoGP. Frankly, as much as we the fans complain about it, the series promoters are well within their rights to completely strip Moto3 and Moto2 of screen time in favor of MotoGP. However, rider safety is a line that I don't think should ever be crossed, especially when they have replaced the Moto3 and Moto2 warm-ups with the MotoGP rider parade. Frankly, as an American fan who is usually up at about midnight to 2 a.m. when this happens, I'm usually taking a nap during the rider parade because there is nothing interesting about it whatsoever. I feel that I am in the vast majority here. I truly don't think that there are very many fans out there who would rather watch riders take a hayride around the track at 5 miles per hour than watch actual Moto3 and Moto2 bikes on the track. Beyond that, the handling of the incident afterwards is both worthy of criticism and represents an ongoing pattern of behavior from the series organizers that frankly should have been left in the past many decades ago. The organizers delayed and shortened the Moto3 race, ran MotoGP according to the originally scheduled time, and moved Moto2 after the MotoGP race. Firstly, many of those around the series have questioned the running of the Moto3 race at all. This includes the riders themselves. In many cases, these are the youngest riders in the paddock. They do not know the condition of their two fellow competitors and in many cases friends, and they are being asked to go out and risk their lives. This was not a crucial race. The championship had already been settled, and even if this race had been canceled, this season will still have the most races we have ever had in 77 years. Nobody is starved for Moto3 content. Even if the race did have to be run for whatever reason, whether it's a contractual obligation or whatever BS excuse you want to come up with, Why could they not simply move Moto3 after MotoGP instead of Moto2? Is it that important that MotoGP starts directly on time as opposed to maybe 10 or 15 minutes later? Is it that important that you have a 45-minute lead up to the MotoGP race that you need to send out the youngest riders who just watched two of their closest competitors be severely injured? At the very least, they could have moved the race until later in the day when we have more information about the riders' conditions and asked the riders themselves if they wanted to go out. This harkens back to the 70s and 80s when race organizers would put the promotion and the profits in front of rider safety to the degree where even when riders died, sometimes races weren't stopped. Fortunately, we've moved past that, but just because we're doing better doesn't mean we're doing good. It seems as though every time the series has a severe accident such as these, everyone is left asking questions of why didn't we do this? Why didn't we do that? It's time to start making decisions to prevent accidents in the first place as opposed to preventing repeats. MotoGP also did a very poor job of keeping people informed about what was happening. Taking a look at the series' Twitter feed at 11:50 a.m. local time, they post about the red flag. 4 minutes later, both riders are reported conscious. And then it was 38 whole minutes, almost the entire length of the Moto3 race that would have run, before we received a simple message saying that riders are being taken to local hospital via helicopter, with no updates on their condition. After this, Moto3, MotoGP, and a portion of the Moto2 race ran before we received any updates. Very frequent posts about on-track action had completely buried any previous information posted by the series at this point, when finally a medical update was issued about Rueda with no updates on Detweiler. I, for one, had these riders in my mind the entire night, and I was seeing unconfirmed reports and speculation about the head doctor's activities all throughout the night on social media. The series cannot leave this kind of information unconfirmed and up to the fans to fearmonger and speculate on. It just never ends well. Now, this is admittedly a difficult issue. What I'm not asking for is for the series to divulge private medical information. As we know, Detweiler's family wants their privacy maintained, and I absolutely respect that. However, there has to be a way to keep fans more informed and keep that information at the forefront as opposed to burying it with 100 posts about the on-track action. A lack of updates in a situation like this on the internet is an awful thing. It only leads to rampant speculation and fear-mongering, and it can't occur. Finally, what I think is the major recurring issue here, the replay. MotoGP is well aware that showing a replay like this will bring in views and discussion surrounding the series. I don't really give a shit. We do not need such a replay, and especially not so soon after the incident has occurred with no information on the condition of the riders. This, in particular, is not even close to the first time this has happened. Red flag incidents with riders who may be severely injured clearly on video are regularly shown nearly instantly after the crash has happened. The one that immediately came to my mind was the tragic accident of Showa Tomizawa in 2010. This was a crash which proved fatal, and replays were shown multiple times from various angles of a crash in which, similarly to the Rueda Detweiler crash, the rider was clearly seriously injured and there were no current updates on his condition. I have a very specific memory of the announcers even saying, "We don't need to see this again," denouncing the choice to show the replay. In the current internet age, clips like this are recirculated over and over and over again. These clips will never go away, and if a rider is seriously injured or worse, them and their loved ones will have to deal with those clips being out there for the rest of time. I have heard the argument that such replays provide clarity and insight into a situation. With no conclusive medical updates available, all it actually does is add to the speculation and fear-mongering that I mentioned earlier. I, for one, would be okay with the series releasing replays later on down the road once both riders are in stable condition and able to give their consent for the replay to be shown. However, it simply should not be handled the way that it is handled right now. Motorcycle racing is and always will be a dangerous sport. However, the past is the past, and there's no reason for us to stay in or regress to bygone eras that proved fatal in many, many cases. Yes, the series should focus on promoting itself and improving action on the track, but the number one focus should always be the safety of the riders. And the series should not revel in moments when riders are in critical condition. There will always be a contingent of fans who want to watch a blood sport. However, they are the small minority and should not be catered to in any way. I believe that most fans would agree with me that the series should strive for safety whenever possible. Bring back warm-ups, strive for safety on sighting laps, improve communications. When incidents like this do happen, Don't immediately show a replay for the sake of the spectacle. Those are my thoughts. Let me know what you think down in the comments. Thank you very much for watching, and as always, a special thank you to my channel members: MVP2112, Venturian CRO, Sean, Motosapien B, Jack the World's Fastest Maori, Drew Gibbs, Really Very Bored 1, Carl Ruppersberg, Friday 42, Troy the Boy, Money Penny, ASX91, Luis Campos, and Ian Ellison. Thank you to everyone for watching, and have a fantastic day.